and welcome to the New World Review. I'm Grandline Waifu and I have huge eyes. The eye of Waifu is upon you and you will hit that like and subscribe button down below. My aura is not malice, it is nice. So nice you will tap those buttons before we meet a kitty bug of doom. Okay, so that's enough eye work. And it's time to take a look at episodes 84 and 85 of Hunter x Hunter. This episode was one huge discourse of status and the implications of it. We got our first look at Nefertiti, Queen of the Kitties. Kite's bad feeling may lead to a catastrophe. It looks like the queen ant managed to get her hands, claws, mandibles? It doesn't really matter. Except it does. Anyway, Kite had a bad feeling and now we all have an evil kitty bug who's the strongest creature that exists in our world at this very moment if the new purple aura is to be believed. We could reasonably have expected that by getting punched, Ramot became super powerful magically, but he has proven through his absolute and unending fear of Nefertiti that there are more frightening and awful creatures than he. Jumping back to the beginning of the episode, it was wonderful seeing big old lion boy who wears Liam's traditional getup of a t-shirt and shorts responding to low-brow easy goading from the ladybug at his side. There's a lot to be said in terms of status behaviors and reactions when the phrase, "What, are you scared?" comes into play. That particular phrase is always a direct challenge in authority, regardless of who says it, and I'm always curious to see how the receiver of such a comment responds. Defensiveness tends to be the response, and it most certainly was here, and that those challenges occurred more than once suggests that the ladybug may challenge him on another occasion, when they're not in such direct danger. Challenging a lion is an interesting decision to make, and the fact that she decided to challenge him in his own environment was even more so. The pride he has is immediately, in my eyes, undermined by the t-shirt and shorts combo he wears. I think the problem in his case is that I know people like him, full of false pride, despite not having done anything but challenge the easiest of those that can be challenged. His decision to go against the rare humans, as they're called, was not a response born of anything more than empty pride, and empty pride is a theme we encountered a lot. The other, obvious one, was Ramot, who became overly powered and overly powerful. That he was so ready to take on the boys despite the fact that the power he displayed was equal to, not greater than theirs, and that he conveniently forgot that there were in fact three of them. I was glad for some of the opening thoughts that began to leak through, though, of how he would be able to challenge the authority of the as yet unborn king. The replay of those images of power and the reprioritizing that occurred in those moments when Nefertiti appeared was a simply wonderful navigation and exploration of the emotions pouring through him. Watching that shift from his power being for his own purposes to the reassertion of the colony as the forefront priority, and so the giving of his abilities to the royal guard? I do wonder whether it was more than just the power involved in Nefertiti's Nen that did this. The purple aura situation suggests more than just the effect of a human specialist, if that makes sense. It suggests that she has some kind of pheromone at her disposal to help remind everyone structurally within their colony of their ultimate goal. The intensity of the eyes, the power involved in her hands, and the scale of her to him as she lay it on his head, I experienced that power and was genuinely unsure whether she would just flip his head off or not. For me to have that thought at all suggests that what was involved was that great, and if that's the case, Gon and Killua are gonna have a great time. So will Hisoka, who I'm sure will turn up eventually. We can't have status discussions without someone who in all other situations has flaunted his dismissal of them altogether. Meanwhile, Colt's coming to an awareness of Nen alone in the instant of Nefertiti's arrival, and the fact that he was left to become the side character was another show of status shifting. He's been pushed to one side, which leaves him in a narratively powerful position. He was not influential or important to the colony after his authority, challenged by Ramot, lowered his status in the eyes of Peggy enough that survival of the fittest kicked right in for them to leave him alone in the cave while they searched out Arrow Boy. Speaking of Arrow Boy, I'm sorry. You did everything you could and you stayed alive so long. The bloodiness of the rest of the episode cast everything as though it was from his perspective. Those red tones used as he told Nefertiti with the secrets of Nen made everything that bit more devastating. That he was speaking at all was kind of interesting. Since she'd used the antennae to access his brain and stimulate the cerebral cortex, it would have made more sense creatively, or at least to me. Let me write Hunter x Hunter. I'll do it. I'll finish it. For him to be thinking the responses and for him to be beaming out through the antennae, connecting his thoughts to her. Like, I feel like that would have been an incredible image if she could just use someone else's antennae to just shove them into her brain and suck out thoughts through the antennae, because antennae equal radar, right? Radar? Yeah, sure. Now that they know how to tell what kinds of Nen users they are, his use is done. It's a powerful thing to strip someone of their clothes. The level of vulnerability in that image of him giving up the information, knowing that he would be killed after the torture. And in fact, we know he was alive and still functionally useful because Nefertiti told them to give him to the queen to be eaten. The experience of hearing yourself saying things to the enemy, then knowing you're going to be eaten, that to me is a horror greater than the concept of being eaten alone. Knowing exactly what's coming and exactly what you've given up when your intention was to help. With his final thoughts, he's betraying the entire human race, and he'll die knowing that. Something that's bugging me is the idea that these creatures can be born with Nen. I understand it would be similar to the human ability, and I understand why that's possible. Animals are a lot more instinctive than humans, so the access to it would be greater, and so it makes sense that they have access to Nen, yes. But so much of what Gon and Killua did was training to harness the ability for their need. It somewhat annoys me, despite knowing that the enemies have to be more powerful for the story to continue, it still annoys me that they're sort of jumping in at such a high level. I worry that we're going to get into a Goku power effect, where all that can happen is more powerful enemies for really no logical reason. Anyway, let's get into episode 85 and see what happens next. Come on, y'all. You've been telling me this arc would be dark for so long, you totally missed what it really is. A love story. This is a romance worthy of Shakespeare. Once Pito tells Ramot to punch everyone and laments how sad it must be to be average, they head out to test their own strength. And meanwhile, we've got this love story where for the first 5 minutes at least of the scene involving the protagonists, or who we presume are the protagonists, because that's arguable, is a retrospective. The only reason to have such a retrospective is because we're going to lose someone important. So that was well flagged. And once Kite handed Gon Jing's hunter license, it was obvious where we were going. Nefertiti has the most powerful malicious aura Gon and Killua have experienced. It was very clear and obvious immediately that despite saying he wouldn't look out for them, that they had a use and therefore were there to help, Kite failed to treat them as people who could do what he could and instead reverted to acting like a father figure. In telling them to run, he essentially sentenced himself to death because it took his attention away from the creature he hunted, making him, ironically, as he had described to them, prey. That Killua got away despite Pito's arrival suggests Killua and Gon could always have got away once they knew the extent of what was after them. Killua plays a fascinating role in this episode in terms of focus and narration. Right up until the moment of Gon deciding to try to fight, Killua was in the background observing. Eyes are a huge creative device in this arc, more than any other previously. In fact, I'd argue that if you watch the arc and only followed where eye lines sit, you'd probably get the vast majority of the story without any of the audio or subtitling. The fact that Kite's hat shaded his eyes made them stand out more, as if hiding the true expression of them from the observer. Metaphorically, it fit, because we lost sight of his eyes at the point that the Eye of Mordor, More Kitty, appeared and took his arm. Kite's softness of character was always a confusing sticking point for me. That he knew Jing had essentially sent his son to meet Kite put a lot of responsibility on someone who had a job to do. Jing sending his son therefore split that focus. One eye on the kids, one on the task, despite telling them he wouldn't. And that was his softness and his downfall. Returning to Jing's love of games, he actively sent his kid to a part of the game that he knew potentially would be absurdly dangerous to see if he'd make it out alive. And if Gon had chosen the card route that meant he'd meet his father immediately, the card that wouldn't have brought Killua with him, I wonder what he'd be fighting now, or if it would be Jing's head in a cat's lap. Killua as observer has come up several times over the course of the series, but nowhere, not anywhere has his love shown so strongly as his knocking out and carrying Gon step by step towards safety. His first thought wasn't even for him, it was for Gon. He had to get Gon out of that environment. It was only when Moral and Nov showed up, and I have to heavily eye roll at their existence because they're next on the Queen's plate. It was their appearance that brought Killua back to reality and re-established his own status as a hunter, namely below the others, at least from their perspective. And this is where I question whether actually Killua is a very effective hunter, possibly the best. because his prey seems to be safety. Not for him, but for Gon. That's what he's hunting. That boy's in love with Gon. The amount he looks at and does for Gon, we always knew it, but the fact that he can't even look at Gon at this point because of how beautiful he is in the light. Togashi had a field day with that one. The softness was like the softness of old movies where they gently blurred the art. One might call this episode Gone with the Wind. Even the music, with its sweeping strings and epic romantic themes straight through the episode, gave us a sense of romance within an action movie, a la Indiana Jones. With Netero's arrival and encouragement of the boys, I'll be interested to see how Netero goes against Pito. The boys have the opportunity to learn to be stronger and to do better, but will any of them still be alive to meet the boys when they get in? And this is only one of the royal guard and certainly not the king. What I would really not like to see is cut corners on this arc. I would like it to be long enough that we see the training and development, but also that we can see how Morel, Nov, and Netero get on against them. Gon's belief that Kite is alive will probably be the prompt to a new level of strength, and that's good. He'll likely need an extra surge of adrenaline. Knowing that the next step is for them to find enough space for 100 humans, sounds like Pito's going to be going out to hunt for themselves. What an exciting prospect. Do I hear global panic bringing every prideful hunter to a place they really shouldn't be because it'll make the danger worse? Maybe. I guess we'll find out next time, because that's it from me. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to click here, and maybe here, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and apparently there's a little bell, and I'll see you next time.